We're going to be hanging in Lightroom today. Really chill video, not the normal style. We'll get back to that in the next video. I have months of shooting in Colorado, a lot to share and try to package into a YouTube video, but really wanted to experiment with a type of video that's much lower lift, something that I can kind of get on the camera for the 30-minute record limit and see where we can get. There are a few things in particular that I wanted to test. I've never used these Rode Wireless Pros in a video just to sit down. So we've got the obvious RE20 as a backup, but want to see how these sound. I won them in a giveaway from Jared's channel, so check him out. And then I think this would be an interesting format for my podcast potentially. If there are episodes that I want to more deeply script or produce, editing in the background might be a nice visual overlay for people that are interested in that. So this is from a hike, maybe early October. I'm gonna give myself a small pat on the back. This is pretty much done. I think we got this one right in camera. Could probably bump this up a few clicks and leave it. Also did a fairly good job cropping. This is from the 50-1.2. I have a recent video on that if you haven't seen it. I was finally able to catch some of the Colorado color while out on this third road trip here. A couple things you could do here if we wanted to be shackled by Instagram's 4 to 5. I tried to give myself a couple good sections divided by thirds here. You could try to square up this road in the center, probably take out some of that sky. Want this diagonal going from the corner though as well. You could do something like that. And then if you wanted to split this into kind of 3 distinct stages as you progress through the photo, we could take this mask, we could subtract the sky to kind of get those mountains. Then we could kind of clean up this line here like so, and then we could create another mask and try to isolate this triangle here. Maybe do something like this. Rotate it, center it, then kind of clean up that line on the same edge. Drag this down a little. All right, so with those masks, you could, let's take off the overlay. You could increase contrast here, separate it a little bit from this far mountain range, and then on this mask, you could add some dehaze, maybe, and just kind of get a more broken visual depth here in those 3 layers, given, these triangle forms. Or you could kill this. I've been really digging 2 to 1 lately, and we could sort of achieve some of the same elements with these triangles. I don't love 2 to 1 here. I don't get quite as much sky as I would like to. So we could bump this out to the classic 16:9 if we wanted. Get a little more sky and call it maybe there. Yeah, definitely a little underexposed by design. Take down some of these highlights. I kind of get right into masking. Like you can see that I haven't even adjusted my white balance here, and I'm already trying to visualize maybe what I would do in some of these corners. I don't want to go crazy accentuating this light source. We've got light coming in from the left here. Do a little bit of brightness here. Typically we'll dehaze this accentuated light source. And I'll add some warmth. Check these as I go. This is all real rough so far. Also, I don't want these blacks as dark. I've been using this lift blacks curve. Very slight point adjustment here. I'm holding Option to get a little bit of a finer grain on this control, but I'll take those up a little bit more. We want to do some basic stuff probably before we go crazy. So I'll Option again to find this masking in the sharpening section. I'll usually bump that way up as long as we're masked out. Profile corrections are on again, 51.2 for this guy. Shot at F11, toggle through your information with I. I've been doing a little bit of heading these calibrations on the teal end, which you don't need to make big adjustments here to make dramatic change. And we're also going to want to, I don't know, this is a little vibrant, saturated for me. So I'm going to take a little bit of those out. We might add them back. We could go more yellow here. We could go all the way. I don't know. Let's try 6250. Just lean into that a little bit. And we can target a lot of these colors. So you got to be real careful here. But I think I'll end up darkening this image a little bit so we can give these yellows a little pop. But we don't want to overdo it because it's already... Nature did a pretty good job here. And then also these greens, we just want to kind of kill the yellow. We want to really embrace that fall look. If I come up here, zoom in a little, you can see this isn't a huge change. Right in this section. Just going to help everything kind of blend in a little bit better. We're going to have a struggle to do this on this particular image. I think it might take a bad sky selection, given how washed out these mountains are. I like to try to bring these skies down just a little bit. But you can see that's sort of pretty noticeable gradient. So try to be careful. On this trip, I've done a lot of blue desaturation, so we can try and see what that looks like. I'm trying to go for a speed edit here so we can get to the next image as well, so I'm running out of time. Now this is pretty desaturated at this point. We can come back and make those triangle shapes that we did on our 4x5 crop. Though here we are obviously not going to be shackled by Instagram's 4x5 aspect ratio. In general, I've been moving away from that and have felt better because of it. So screw that. No more doing that for me. Bring down this contrast. Sorry, rather bring up this contrast. And then I do kind of like washing this out a little bit. But let's draw it into the corner. So we're really focused on that far edge. And then let's take out the sky. O to lose our mask. Actually, back on, we probably don't want this section involved in this too much. Gonna feather this out with the subtracted linear. Now if we click back on this, come down to dehaze. See, that has a pretty dramatic effect in this corner, increasing kind of that accentuated light that we've added as well. So kind of make sure we really refine this to stay off the tip of those trees, because that I think looks a little bit jacked up. And I think we'll come back and probably add that saturation back up to normal. That's a de-emphasis on the blue for sure. We could do a couple more things here. So I've lowered the flow and density in my brush. We're gonna add a full stop here. Just brush this in, shift clicking. These are straight lines, you won't be able to tell. Real rough here. And holding the option to probably erase this tree line that we've cut a little too aggressive. Let's turn that off, and then you can see that's pretty crazy. If we zoom out, it doesn't look too terrible, but typically I would put this full exposure bump just to see what I'm doing, and then lower that afterwards. And then we could probably hit this pretty hard with clarity if we wanted, because it's super local. And we could come into Photoshop and we could clone out or remove some of these cars. I would probably use the healing brush for that. You can, there's a whole suite of tools now in Lightroom to do that kind of stuff. It seems slow and kind of clunky, so I would typically bring that type of work still into Photoshop, for me at least. That's where I'm comfortable. I think maybe one of the original edits, maybe I tried to rip out some of these power lines, but I think that's pretty stylized, obviously. We're deleting a lot of blue, but that's sort of the vibe I had gone on that hike, so that's a speed edit, what I might do there. I haven't touched much at all, really. Shout out to the beauty of the landscape to get this right in camera. You don't need to do a whole lot when you have some of these fall colors. Alternatively, and I don't use these that often, if you were a subscriber or listener to the early podcast, I did try to pilot some presets. I will typically use these sparingly even on my own work. Sometimes I'll do so to get a good color consistency across a set of photos, but I did like doom and gloom green on some of these. Again, I would encourage you, if you dig really deep, you can probably find my offering, but I would encourage you to kind of play with your own here and just learn to edit as opposed to using presets generally. All right, we are running out of time here on the camera. I do want to give a shout out to Peak Design one last time for making this trip enjoyable with some gifted bags, this tech pouch, and the 50-liter duffel. My typical Black Friday approach is not to buy anything you don't need. If you've been eyeing some of this stuff up, they have a sale on pretty much everything. Moment's got a sale on stuff, so I typically approach Black Friday from a utility standpoint, stock up on hard drives, so got a few for some client work. I'll get some memory cards, anything that's not super flashy that I know I need, so check this stuff out if you're in the market. But if not, don't get tricked by flashy deals. Actually, I'm usually pretty good about staying away from them, but I fell victim to one in particular, mainly for my hockey channel. We'll be using it here, so stay tuned. But this shot is from Chasm Lake, a hike that I've done 3 times here. Pretty strenuous, at least for my ability. And we had some hikers here. On this day, I snuck up the 70 to 200 and the 100 to 400. And so really had nothing to be used wide, except for my phone. I did use that considerably on the wide end. I can put a few of those up now. But the lake was frozen. Spent close to an hour up there until it was cold enough to turn around. This shot was 2 hikers that were going way past the lake. And so before they disappeared, snagged this shot. I actually kind of like the 3 to 2 here. Again, if we're feeling shackled, this isn't a bad frame. Again, this was shot at 200, but pretty wide for how far away they were. So again, just trying to give myself options in post. I do like the full 3 to 2 here, like I said. Also, really digging these 2 to 1s. You could go super tight, even tighter if you wanted to really push the crop. Or, in this scene, I prefer just to kind of show the grandeur and really center these guys up. Go somewhere about there. And we've just got some nice lines here. This is unintentional in camera, right? I'm just trying to get a pretty zoomed in shot on them. And you're working with what you've got in terms of this backdrop. But it does balance pretty well with this patch of snow and this swooping patch and this middle patch. And took a few frames of these guys, but really wanted the frame where they are right in front of that snow patch, so you get pretty high contrast. You could look at this from a distance and maybe not quite see them, but as soon as you do, it kind of, you're very led into, the photo demands you to see them. We want to be careful with the snow here, so we're just going to really kill the highlights right from the start. Though, I don't know, having them border on white just before we lose some detail is kind of nice. You could do a lot with these rocks. Again, I've been using, this slight curve that I have baked in, very subtle. And I've been using this lift blacks curve that I might prefer here. Again, always option clicking to see my sharpening mask here. Probably don't need a whole lot. I typically will mask and bump sharpening almost on everything. Sometimes you definitely don't need it, but I find if you're masking it away, it works pretty well. You could come here in color calibration and try to see if there's any sort of shade you want to really give to those rocks, but I think that the more appropriate play here is to try to... There aren't many colors. We're dealing with that orange, that yellow, and however white you want the snow. So you could go pretty cool, but I tend to lean a little warm on something like this. You could also go into some color grading, split toning, whatever you want to call it. And really kind of cool it down that way. And maybe counterbalance just a touch. And that's a little too much. You gotta be careful here as well. On a scene like this, typically you want to accentuate the draw of your eye in. I'm gonna punch the blacks down and probably bring up the highlights again. You gotta be real careful here not to really blow these out and lose a ton of detail. Like there, we're starting to lose a little bit in here. A little bit more than I want. We toggle this, we're just kind of increasing that local contrast pretty sharply. I want to duplicate this. And so instead of just like really crunching the texture clarity in that area, we can actually do the reverse as well. And so I will typically make dual masks like this, inverses of each other. And on this outer mask, we can just touch all of this down. Now we lose a lot of contrast with that dehaze, but it does make it a little bit more an atmosphere of the day. And then what we can also do, I want to create a vignette, but I don't really necessarily want it circular. Linear gradients on each side. And really just isolate the subjects like this. So, and we can go pretty far with this. We don't have to, but we also might do, so if you saw in the wide pictures from the phone, there's kind of a pretty high wall up here. We could kind of accentuate this light source, which is a little bit wild. We can try it. Give ourselves a half here. Again, pull some dehaze. Probably not that much. And maybe a little warmth. That's kind of a lot. And we're going to counteract this by just dropping the whole exposure down. That gives you at least some kind of shaped light in a way that we didn't have before. You might take a little bit of this off some of these prominent rocks. We push up our flow. Kind of painting that away. Just to give us something on the edges, a little bit of something to latch onto. And again, not doing a whole lot here. Mostly a white balance change, to be honest. This is maybe one of the pictures that I would do a traditional vignette on. I mean, we can see I always drag this midpoint way in, bump the roundness, bump the feather. That's a little much for me, but not terrible. And it still looks just a touch warm and maybe a little magenta. Maybe not. I think you could also come down here and you could probably suck some of this out. I'm not going to mess with the hue. And let's take a little more out of the highlights just across the board. I might stop there. Before or after. Subtle. You might want a little more detail here in this snow. So let's go. Big brush. Low flow, low density. Again, we can just add this to see what we're brushing here. We definitely don't want the whole point. Holding O and then Option to contract a little bit. So I kind of want those hikers to be popping and taking a little off this wall. Toggle that again. Let's go -half and then pull down the highlights a little bit. And then if we toggle this, that still looks a little unnaturally dark. That's a little better and bring something back there. And that's probably where I would stop. And we're just about out of time. If you liked this type of video, if you would like to see some more editing on the podcast, if you would like to see a standalone video like this, maybe more focused on techniques, or if you just like hanging around, seeing how some of the sausage is made, let me know. And if you hate this, don't be shy either. Next video, like I said, a lot of photography from the last couple months, trying to package that up into a very browsable, clickable thumbnail, but that's always tough, so we'll see. And if you haven't seen my 50mm video and you haven't seen my teaser from the dunes, I'll link those here. Later.